Harold Frederick Shipman, January 14, 1946, January 13, 2004, known to acquaintances as Fred Shipman, was an English general practitioner who is believed to be one of the most prolific serial killers in modern history. On January 31, 2000, he was found guilty of the murder of 15 patients under his care. His total number of victims was approximately 250. Shipman was sentenced to life imprisonment with the recommendation that he never be released. He died by suicide by hanging on January 13, 2004, a day before his 58th birthday, in his cell at Prison Wakefield, West Yorkshire. The Shipman Inquiry, a 2-year-long investigation of all deaths certified by Shipman, which Dame Janet Smith chaired, examined Shipman's crimes. The inquiry identified 215 victims and estimated his total victim count at 250, about 80% of whom were elderly women. Shipman's youngest confirmed victim was a 41-year-old man, although suspicion arose that he had killed patients as young as 4. He is the only British doctor known to be guilty of murdering his patients, although other doctors have been acquitted of similar crimes or convicted on lesser charges. Harold Frederick Shipman was born on January 14, 1946 on the Bestwood Council estate in Nottingham, Nottinghamshire, England, the second of the 3 children of Harold Frederick Shipman, May 12, 1914, January 5, 1985, a truck driver, and Vera Britton, December 23, 1919, June 21, 1963. His working-class parents were devout Methodists. When growing up, Shipman was an accomplished rugby player in youth leagues. Shipman passed his 11+ in 1957, moving to High Pavement Grammar School, Nottingham, which he left in 1964. He excelled as a distance runner, and in his final year at school served as vice-captain of the athletics team. Shipman was particularly close to his mother, who died of lung cancer when he was aged 17. Her death came in a manner similar to what later became Shipman's own modus operandi. In the later stages of her disease, she had morphine administered at home by a doctor. Shipman witnessed his mother's pain subside, despite her terminal condition, until her death on June 21, 1963. On November 5, 1966, he married Primrose May Oxtoby. The couple had 4 children. Shipman studied medicine at Leeds School of Medicine, University of Leeds, graduating in 1970. He began working at Pontefract General Infirmary in Pontefract, West Riding of Yorkshire, and in 1974 took his first position as a general practitioner, GP, at the Abraham Ormerod Medical Centre in Todmorden. In the following year, Shipman was caught forging prescriptions of pethidine, Demerol, for his own use. He was fined £600 and briefly attended a drug rehabilitation clinic in York. He became a GP at the Donnybrook Medical Centre in Hyde, near Manchester, in 1977. Shipman continued working as a GP in Hyde throughout the 1980s, and established his own surgery at 21 Market Street in 1993, becoming a respected member of the community. In 1983, he was interviewed in an edition of the Granada television documentary World in Action on how the mentally ill should be treated in the community. A year after his conviction, the interview was rebroadcast on Tonight with Trevor McDonald. Shipman's trial began at Preston Crown Court on October 5, 1999. He was charged with the murders of 15 women by lethal injections of diamorphine, all between 1995 and 1998. Shipman's legal representatives tried unsuccessfully to have the Grundy case tried separately from the others, as a motive was shown by the alleged forgery of Grundy's will. On January 31, 2000, after 6 days of deliberation, The jury found Shipman guilty of 15 counts of murder and 1 count of forgery. Mr. Justice Forbes subsequently sentenced Shipman to life imprisonment on all 15 counts of murder, with a recommendation that he never be released, to be served concurrently with a sentence of 4 years for forging Grundy's will. On 11th of February, 10 days after his conviction, Shipman was struck off by the General Medical Council, GMC. 2 years later, Home Secretary David Blunkett confirmed the judge's whole life tariff, just months before British government ministers lost their power to set minimum terms for prisoners. While authorities could have brought many additional charges, they concluded that a fair hearing would be impossible in view of the enormous publicity surrounding the original trial. Furthermore, the 15 life sentences already handed down rendered further litigation unnecessary. Shipman consistently denied his guilt, disputing the scientific evidence against him. He never made any public statements about his actions. Shipman's wife, Primrose, steadfastly maintained her husband's innocence even after his conviction. Shipman is the only doctor in the history of British medicine found guilty of murdering his patients. John Bodkin Adams was charged in 1957 with murdering a patient, amid rumors he had killed dozens more over a 10-year period and possibly provided the role model for Shipman. However, he was acquitted. Historian Pamela Cullen has argued that because of Adams' acquittal, there was no impetus to examine the flaws in the British legal system until the Shipman case. Shipman hanged himself in his cell at Prison Wakefield at 6:20 a.m. on January 13, 2004, on the eve of his 58th birthday, and was pronounced dead at 8:10 a.m. A statement from Her Majesty's Prison Service indicated that he had hanged himself from the window bars of his cell using bed sheets. After Shipman's death, his body was taken to the mortuary at the Medical Legal Centre for a post-mortem examination. West Yorkshire coroner David Hinchliffe eventually released the body to the family after an inquest was opened and adjourned shortly after. Some of the victims' families said they felt cheated, as Shipman's suicide meant they would never have the satisfaction of his confession, nor answers as to why he committed his crimes. Home Secretary David Blunkett said the celebration was tempting. You wake up and you receive a call telling you Shipman has topped himself and you think, is it too early to open a bottle? And then you discover that everybody's very upset that he's done it. Shipman's death divided national newspapers, with the Daily Mirror branding him a cold coward and condemning the prison service for allowing his suicide to happen. However, The Sun ran a celebratory front-page headline, "Ship Ship Hooray." The Independent called for the inquiry into Shipman's suicide to look more widely at the state of UK prisons as well as the welfare of inmates. In The Guardian, an article by General Sir David Ransbitham, who had formerly served as Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Prisons, suggested that whole life sentencing be replaced by indefinite sentencing, for this would at least give prisoners the hope of eventual release and reduce the risk of their ending their own lives by suicide as well as making their management easier for prison officials. Shipman's motive for suicide was never established, though he reportedly told his probation officer that he was considering suicide to assure his wife's financial security after he was stripped of his National Health Service pension. Primrose Shipman received a full NHS pension. She would not have been entitled to it if Shipman had lived past 60. Additionally, there was evidence that Primrose, who had consistently protested Shipman's innocence despite the overwhelming evidence, had begun to suspect his guilt. Shipman refused to take part in courses that would have encouraged acknowledgement of his crimes, leading to the temporary removal of privileges, including the opportunity to telephone his wife. During this period, according to Shipman's cellmate, he received a letter from Primrose exhorting him to tell me everything, no matter what. A 2005 inquiry found that Shipman's suicide could not have been predicted or prevented, but that procedures should nonetheless be re-examined. After Shipman's body was released to the family, It remained in Sheffield for more than a year despite multiple false reports about his funeral. His widow was advised by police against burying her husband in case the grave was attacked. Shipman was eventually cremated on March 19, 2005 at Hutcliffe Wood Crematorium. The cremation took place outside normal hours to maintain secrecy and was attended only by Primrose and their 4 children. In January 2001, Chris Craig, a senior West Yorkshire police detective, was selected to lead an investigation into 22 of the West Yorkshire deaths. Following this, the Shipman Inquiry, submitted in July 2002, concluded that he had killed at least 215 of his patients between 1975 and 1998, during which time he practiced in Todmorden, 1974–75, and Hyde, 1977–98. Dame Janet Smith, the judge who submitted the report, admitted that many more deaths of a suspicious nature could not be definitively ascribed to Shipman. Most of his victims were elderly women in good health. In her 6th and final report, issued on January 24, 2005, Smith reported that she believed that Shipman had killed 3 patients, and she had serious suspicions about 4 further deaths, including that of a 4-year-old girl, during the early stage of his medical career at Pontefract General Infirmary. In total, 459 people died while under his care between 1971 and 1998, but it is uncertain how many of those were murder victims, as he was often the only doctor to certify a death. Smith's estimate of Shipman's total victim count over that 27-year period was 250. The GMC charged 6 doctors, who signed cremation forms for Shipman's victims, with misconduct, claiming they should have noticed the pattern between Shipman's home visits and his patients' deaths. All these doctors were found not guilty. In October 2005, a similar hearing was held against 2 doctors who worked at Tameside General Hospital in 1994, who failed to detect that Shipman had deliberately administered a grossly excessive dose of morphine. The Shipman Inquiry recommended changes to the structure of the GMC. In 2005 it came to light that Shipman may have stolen jewelry from his victims. In 1998, police had seized over £10,000 worth of jewelry they found in his garage. In March 2005, when Primrose asked for its return, police wrote to the families of Shipman's victims asking them to identify the jewelry. Unidentified items were handed to the Assets Recovery Agency in May. The investigation ended in August. Authorities returned 66 pieces to Primrose and auctioned 33 pieces that she confirmed were not hers. Proceeds of the auction went to Tameside Victim Support. The only piece returned to a murdered patient's family was a platinum diamond ring, for which the family provided a photograph as proof of ownership. A memorial garden to Shipman's victims, called the Garden of Tranquility, opened in Hyde Park, Hyde, on July 30, 2005. As of early 2009, families of over 200 of the victims of Shipman were still seeking compensation for the loss of their relatives. In September 2009, authorities announced that the letters Shipman wrote in prison would be sold at auction, but following complaints from victims' relatives and the media, they withdrew the letters from the sale. The Shipman case, and a series of recommendations in the Shipman Inquiry report, led to changes to standard medical procedures in the UK, now referred to as the Shipman effect. Many doctors reported changes in their dispensing practices, and a reluctance to risk overprescribing pain medication may have led to underprescribing. Death certification practices were altered as well. Perhaps the largest change was the movement from single doctor general practices to multiple doctor general practices. This was not a direct recommendation, but rather because the report stated that there was not enough safeguarding and monitoring of doctors' decisions. The forms needed for cremation in England and Wales have had their questions altered as a direct result of the Shipman case. For example, the persons organizing the funeral must answer, "Do you know or suspect that the death of the person who has died was violent or unnatural? Do you consider that there should be any further examination of the remains of the person who has died?"